welcome everyone to the March Evolutionary Themes Overview. What I'm going to start with is focusing on the first couple weeks of this month. There's a very distinct theme as Mars and Venus complete their time in Aquarius. The first main transit we have this weekend, right, where, we got Venus squaring Uranus, like right now. And then for the next week plus, we have Mars moving to square Uranus as well. So we have right now Mars and Venus in Aquarius. And when I pull up this chart, I'm fixing it as an Aries ascendant, just so it's simplified. And this is sort of part one of the core theme dynamics of this month. After this, both Mars and Venus move into Pisces, and let's just quickly take a look at that. First Venus, and then around the third week of March or so, Mars will also move into Pisces, and that's a completely different ecosystem, okay? And the reason why I'm really drawn to continue to make my interpretive work focused on the movement of Mars and Venus is because they are the nodal rulers. So let me quickly review why that's significant, why that holds a lot of weight for me. And let me just send a text to Michelle. Okay. When we have the ruler of the South Node, this gives us particular specific context for the kinds of dynamics from the past that are emerging right now to be integrated, to be resolved, to be completed. Doesn't matter where the South Node is transiting, the ruler of that South Node makes it an actual reality. So you could actually look at the ruler of the South Node in your natal chart. So your own natal Venus gives a very particular personalized context for the Libra dynamics emerging. But also in transit, that's personal and collective. Venus is transiting somewhere in your own chart. So right now, Venus at 18 degrees Aquarius, squaring Uranus at 19 degrees Taurus. That's transiting in your chart, showing up somewhere. This is very much live time, present moment. What are the particular relational themes emerging to be cleared and clarified? And then the ruler of the North Node is to speak to present moment actualization of those evolutionary themes that are wanting to be integrated. Where can choices and a new understanding of self and life be embraced at this time that supports and nurtures our own growth, both natally and also in transit? And just this past month, in February, Mars and Venus crossed each other. So we're in a very brand new phase with Mars and Venus, right? They're still very close. They're still conjunct. They're in a new phase. They're the rulers of the nodes. So just because of that, what's happening with them is has a lot of significance. We also have the fact that Mars and Venus are in a new phase with Pluto. And it's still very new. I mean, they haven't even moved to the first semi-sextile, which is what will happen when they both enter Pisces. They're in that first very subjective arc of development. So what does that mean? To review, this is a new evolutionary cycle. We have not yet quite seen where it's going, but a fundamental transformation within our lives. Our values, how we're embodying greater meaning and value in our life, the agreement and the decisions that we're making in our relationships. This is the beginning of a very powerful initiatory process. And it's very clear where it's going, right? You just sort of progress this new phase. You look at them into Pisces. They're going to be joining Saturn. There's a crystallization that happens as they join Saturn right here. But this is also coinciding with the upcoming eclipse season on the North Node in Aries and this Jupiter-Uranus coming together. There's so much radical culmination happening over just the next month and a half, right? And as that happens, Mars and Venus are going to be separating even more. So let's just contemplate this for a moment. What does it mean when two planets are together and then in time they separate? And this is where I want to always remind everyone that aspects never exist in a vacuum. They're always a part of a process. So a conjunction, everyone will talk about the particular aspects. Today we'll be talking about the square a lot. But we want to see it all as a part of a developmental process. So as a process, when two planets are in the conjunction, they're going to be together for a while. Okay? But there comes a point where they separate and they fall into a completely new phase of experience. That's helpful to understand. As two planets separate, the initial subjectivity is lost to a more well-rounded, matured understanding of where all of this is going. There's a lot of subjectivity and a lack of perspective where we are right now. Right? With Mars and Venus still in new phase, still very close to Pluto, there's a general lack of objective awareness and perspective on where all of this is going. But there's definitely no lack of very potent psychological content. New phase. Here's what you're working with. Here are the dynamics and the changes that are in motion right now. And that's why we look to the significant turning points, right? Mars and Venus squaring Uranus. Okay, that's bringing in a lot more dimensionality. That's both of these planets entering into a new phase of experience with another big outer planet. And that's why we look at their movement into Pisces as significant. Now they're both 30 degrees from that initial conjunction with Pluto. That's a new threshold, right? It's like you're hiking through a forest and it was a deciduous ecosystem. It's deciduous. Sure, you're walking. You're not in the same place you were when you began, but you're going to see more or less the same environment. Different trees, but same environment. You go up in elevation a little bit, and suddenly you're in a coniferous ecosystem. You see redwoods, you see cedar trees, and whatever beautiful trees you have where you live. It's a completely different world. Different species live there. And if you're not paying attention, you won't even notice. You're just walking. And that's how it is for most of us. You just one day realize, oh yeah, I'm definitely in a different place right now than when I was before. But if we're tracking the transits on the outside, on the inside, because that's where they are, we can feel more of the pulse. We can feel more of the rhythm and the fluidity and say, yeah, I can sense, like that felt sense, I'm transitioning into a new phase of experience. I think having this awareness really does bring a lot of humility in the sense that we can appreciate there's a flow and there's a rhythm to our life experiences. So we can trust it. And we can develop this perspective on astrology and be able to understand, oh yeah, looking at the transits right now, it's very, very clear that we're still very much in a new phase of experience. New phase Mars, Venus, new phase with Pluto, right? So it gives us a lot of, even Chiron, right? Chiron is in that very much new phase. Okay. So the focus of the first part of this talk, and we'll see how long this part takes, will be on this square with Uranus. I'll say two things before I jump into it. One, this, besides for the recent squares with Jupiter, I would say this is the first potent, more existential, deeper transit that we've experienced since early February when all of these planets entered Aquarius and joined Pluto. Right? A strong aspect to an outer planet is more existential. It points to the deeper soul dimension of our being, right? So it's going to speak to an evolutionary process of deeper change and transformation. It's going to be catalyzing. And being a last quarter square, and let me just explain that. Last quarter square, you put your finger on Uranus, move all the way through the zodiac until you get to the faster moving planets, Venus and Mars. So this is a 270 degree square. And that 270 degree square, this last quarter phase, is bringing a cycle to a close. So there's a lot of culmination and a very strong catalyst within that square to radicalize, to say, I am going to do something different. I've already been walking this path for a while. There's a strong pressure for an essential change that I need to be the leader of embracing and changing in my own life. I need to claim this for myself. So the quality of that is very different than the strong new phase repetition that we've been having in various ways over the past month. Okay. The other thing that I'll point out in terms of its significance is just sort of the obvious. Uranus is Uranus. It's the ruler of Aquarius. We have Jupiter moving towards Uranus. There is, over the next month and a half, a profound evolutionary focus on this Uranus. It's just what's happening. There's not one astrologer that won't say that the month of April, next month, is one of the most astrologically potent and intense months of the year. That's what I would say. Some good ones later on as well. There's always something to look forward to. Even if you're taking the hike and you go somewhere and say, oh, this landscape's pretty boring, we'll just keep on walking. There's always going to be some sort of crazy new nuance that's going to interact with us from a different angle and say, well, how about this? But this is a potent one. So all of this build up to this Uranus transit actually says a lot. Okay. With all of that said, let's jump into this particular square. I won't give too much attention to Venus. I mean, it's happening right now, so I'll briefly speak to it, but where I really want to give our attention is Mars. So both squaring Uranus, of course, speak to a natural liberation process. It is about deconditioning from so much of what we've known, but there's a very, very strong invitation in these transits. So the first thing I'll say with Venus, of course, this always speaks to the ground of our relationships, our agreements. Venus being relational, it's thoughtful, it's about listening. Okay, so whenever we have a Venus transit, we're looking at our communication, our conversations, our agreements. What are we choosing to do together? Right, this can bring a sense of dissociation or disconnect if we find ourselves relationally in a place of giving and receiving that doesn't really align with our soul. Do I really want this? Am I really agreeing to this? Is this something that I actually want to be doing? And so one of the big teachings, this is emphasized in the square to Uranus, is I want to position myself relationally where I'm not just meeting these expectations of who I'm supposed to be, but I'm orienting from a place of true inclusivity and friendliness. I want the best for you. I want you to be well. I want you to have a good life. I want you to get what you need. And I want to show up in a way where my existence, my joy, my embodied existence here is in benefit to yours. But in order to do that, I have to equally honor and respect my agency and my right and my deserving to be myself. So it's all about the joy of us being in our authentic vibration. Authentic vibration. But the liberation with that Uranus Venus says, well, there's always that threshold between the security of what we know, the comfort of what's familiar, and the uncertainty of what's to come. And this is the name of the game right now. This is the name of the game. I have to be more interested in the uncertainty of what's to come than the familiarity of what I know. The issue with Venus and Taurus in general, and this is heightened with Jupiter moving towards Uranus, we will really find ourselves becoming starkly aware of the stagnation and depression and lack of life and joy and vitality in our lives and in our relationships, to the extent that we're concerned with and holding on to what we know. Taurus tends to prefer that, right? In a non-evolutionary state of mind, Taurus will hold on to what is known and what is familiar only because it's known and familiar. Albeit dysfunctional and not very healthy, it's safe because I know it. And so to embrace what's unknown is oftentimes scary, but the invitation is that self-reflectiveness of Taurus and Venus. How do I feel? How do I feel? Do I feel good? Right? That question, do I feel in my body? Do I feel alive? Do I feel like I'm inhabiting this life that I'm here to live? Am I claiming it? That gauge gets to be the beginning of change. Taurus and the archetype of Venus in general will only make changes anywhere, like any Venus signature. It's a very interesting thing to think about. the ability to embrace change grows and deepens only to the extent that we can say, I now understand that I'm going to be safe in these changes. We have to become aware of the necessity for change and adequately come to believe that we're going to be safe and have what we need in the face of these changes. Prior to that, the resistance patterns of Taurus and Venus will be to hold on to the known, because even if it's not working well, I don't want to be insecure. So working with the Aquarian Uranian energies, we have to appreciate that our security comes in life. Our security comes in being engaged with the, like, you're here. I am here. This is real. This is real. This body, this instrument, this vehicle has purpose and meaning and direction. And I think when we're not in touch with meaningful, purposeful choices in our life, it's harder to make more purposeful and meaningful choices. You know what I'm saying? Like when we're making agreements that we don't want to make, it's harder to feel excited about food. It's harder to feel excited about our projects or our creativity. We become more and more disengaged from the parts of our life that actually have meaning and value to us, because we're not connected to ourselves. We're not connected to the purpose and meaning of our life. I've shared this before. It's a very helpful distinction and thing to remember. From an evolutionary perspective, the whole Taurus and Venusian archetype is all about wanting to be here. It's all about a certain quality of self-entitlement to say, I actually want to survive. I want to exist. I want to thrive here, right? It's actually more than survival. It's, I want to feel the attractiveness of having a physical human existence. Because without that, there would be no biological impulse and draw to sustain a human incarnation, which from a Scorpio-Pluto point of view is about death. It's about evolution. It's about change, right? It's kind of uncomfortable. But we have to want to actually be in the body. We actually have to have a sense of, this has value and meaning, and I'm going to claim it and own it. So without that self-esteem and self-value, if we're just sort of denying that value, we won't really have the ability to say, there's relevance and purpose and meaning in my life, and I'm claiming it. So that's what's really opening up right now with this Venus square. Now, let's just continue this phase, right? Because we never want to just stop with an aspect and say, okay, that was an aspect, that was good. You know, it's like being on an amusement park and going on a ride and saying, well, that ride was over. Well, you're still in the amusement park. And the amusement park has lots of other rides. It's not like you've done the ride and now you're at home again. That's what aspects are like. You have a particular experience, and then when that aspect is over, you're still in a particular phase, right? You're still at the amusement park. And there's the next ride. It's going to be a different aspect, but it's going to take a while until you might even leave the amusement park. Do you follow that analogy? Right? You might leave, and then you're in a different phase of experience. You're going to be at a playground, and there's different experiences in the playground. So Venus squaring Uranus is a station. It's a particular experience. It's very heightened, like a nodal point, right? But even when we pass that square, let's just look at it for a moment. Venus passes Uranus, okay? It's still going to be squaring this Uranus, but within that last quarter phase. There's a very heightened radicalization that continues, actually all the way up until it enters Pisces. I would venture to say, from the point of view of Venus, for the first 11, 12 days of this month, there's an integration process happening. And I would say it this way: we are called upon to individuate ourselves and claim responsibility for how we want to feel. How do we want to feel? And let's give some practical examples. I'm going to eat the foods that work for me. I'm going to honor the rhythms and the values and the practices that work for me. I'm going to be the one that decides what I can give and what I cannot give, and what I need and what I need to ask for. But it's coming from a place of freedom where we are remembering first and foremost, this life is in our control. I mean, there's so much that's not in our control. The part that is are how we're choosing to individually relate to our choices, what we're consuming, what we're giving, what we're taking, what we're sharing. So there's a growing clarity of that over the first week or two of this movement of Venus moving through Aquarius and moving into Pisces. That's what I would say the theme. It's a radicalization. The initial square is like bringing us into awareness of it. Okay? But you're still at the amusement park. There are still games and rides to play within that particular theme. Now, all of this gets incredibly heightened when we look into Mars. When we're looking at Venus, remember, it's the ruler of the South Node. So a lot of the clarifications that are happening here are clearing maybe past patterns, or where we might have difficulty differentiating ourselves from other people's values, needs, expectations, or what everyone else does, right? When we shift our focus to Mars, it's specifically about me and my soul, my purpose, my direction, where I am the only one that can make these choices. I am the only one that can determine for myself what I need to do to further my soul's evolutionary path. Mars, being the ruler of the North Node, which we have that new phase with Chiron, is absolutely emphasizing if there is any degree of dissociation and disconnect and not claiming our self-leadership, this growing square to Uranus, and let's just kind of look at it over the next several days. The square will take a solid week before it actually culminates. So we have March 9th, right? And then we have, for the next 10 days or so, it's still going to be very close to Uranus, right? Completing its time in Aquarius. So this is a big part of what's happening in March, this, Mars-Uranus. There's going to be anger. There's going to be stress. There's going to be this deep sense of something fundamental needs to change. So let's unpack this from a few different dimensions. The energy of stress, which is like a cousin to anger, or sibling to anger, stress and anger. Overwhelm, right? This is the build-up, the gradual build-up of making choices and decisions in life, or not making choices and decisions in life, leading to a sort of pattern of being, a pattern of living, where we feel out of control. And so we're doing what we don't want to do, and we feel that the needs that we have and the decisions that we need to make, the freedom that we need to live our life's purpose, are in some way being inhibited or limited by experience on the outside. The presence of stress and its close cousin anger are very good if we're able to kind of catch what's on the other end of it. So one of the issues with Aquarius and Uranus is the archetype of dissociation. If we're so afraid of really claiming the life and vitality of our own self-leadership and our own soul purpose, we'll just go with the flow, right? We'll be afraid of actually claiming what we need to claim for ourselves and doing what only we can decide we know to do. And that dissociation is a sort of, in order to not face the deeper calling of my own soul, I need to not feel myself. I need to not feel myself. It literally just takes enough life experience to push us and point out back to us where we're not being ourselves, right? If everything's cool and nothing's bothering, there are no environmental stimulus that trigger us. Circumstances in our life aren't triggering enough to actually bring up where we're in our own dissociation, then we might just stay in that dissociation. External stresses, external problems, things that fall apart, things that we can't control, might just be enough to push us back into our own soul. on the other end as well, there can be such a sense of just going along with the current of things as they are and feeling such an utter lack of joy and enthusiasm about our life that too can instigate some random moment of just flipping out. And to the Aquarian energy, and Uranus can often express in two ways, like that sudden shocks and surprises thing, which is heightened with Mars, can be you become a sudden shock and surprise, right? You do something and say something that came out of the blue because of all the suppression, or something happens in the environment that you didn't see coming and sort of shocks you out of the mold of the life that you've been living. They're kind of the same thing. They're two different ways of going about the need for essential change. I was listening to this video while I was working out this morning, and it's from this guy that does jump rope exercises. And I was getting a lot of inspiration from what he was sharing. He said something to the likes of, people think, he was talking about weight loss. He says, people think weight loss is a very complicated thing. And of course, there's always nuance. We have different conditions. Everyone has their own journey. But there's a general rule. Eat less and move more. Simple as that. Now, of course, you can move more and move in unhelpful ways. You can eat less in destructive ways as well. You can be eating less, but only eating not very healthy food. Or be eating less in a way that's actually hurtful for yourself when your body needs food. Right? You could be moving in ways that actually damages your body. But as a very general principle, before going into the nuance, it's make the choice to do these simple things. And the thing that we often lack is we're looking for so much more information. We feel so disconnected from our own life, our own joy, our own meaning, our own value. We'll spend thousands of dollars trying to find something that will bring it back for us. A diet, a practice, an exercise, a retreat, going somewhere. We're almost constantly looking for this next big thing that will help us get more excitement and get back into our life. But the deeper teaching is choice making. Right? The deeper teaching is making the choice to do the simple, stable things in our life every day that will actually help make lasting and helpful change in our own life. So I had a dream last night where I was simply told, you're eating too much and you're not letting your body rest. And it was funny that that video came into my feed because I wasn't looking for it, right? And recently, I've been snacking more. And that hasn't actually been very good for me. When I snack more during the day, I'm not necessarily eating because I'm hungry. I'm eating maybe because I'm distracting myself. And that actually leads towards more exhaustion. And in my dream, I was told very clearly, you're not giving your body adequate time to rest. I'm like, oh, that's obvious. Thank you for telling me that. That was helpful. It was a good reminder, right? So what's the leadership that I'm invited into? Don't eat when you're not hungry, right? Then the nuance is like, when I am eating, what can I eat? Generally more protein, right? More protein, more good fats. That'll help me live on that energy longer, but also make sure you're moving a lot so that you're eating and you're converting it into something that's helpful and good for you. Don't just be sedentary. Like the things and the change that we need to make in life, and whatever it is for us, like I want to write this book or do this creative project. We can live our lives indefinitely for long periods of time, not moving with any of these things because we're not fundamentally willing to take charge of our energy, to actually shift our habits and our patterns. And why is that so difficult? Why are we often so afraid of just taking greater leadership of our own soul path? This differentiates us from everyone else. This is not just a Venus, this is fundamentally what is of essence with Mars. It says you have to be a leader to walk to the drum of your own soul. Find your own rhythm, find your own beat. And Mars is drumming. It's the rhythm, it's the engagement that says, I am moving, I'm going somewhere new that I and no one else has ever gone before. That's differentiating ourselves from the rhythm and the patterns and the precedent of what we've done and what other people do as well. But it's simple self-leadership. There's this guy that I've often quoted, He has a stellium of planets in Aquarius in the first house. So that itself embodies the Mars and Aquarius energy. And in fact, also in the second house, that also embodies the Uranus in Taurus energy. And his name is escaping me. Maybe one of you in the comments can know this. He's the kind of guy that said, I want to join the Navy SEALs. I'm several hundred pounds overweight, but I want to join. If I want to achieve this, what do I need to do to get fit enough to achieve it? Right? David Goggins, that's his name. So he just worked out intensely every day for several weeks and minimized his caloric intake so he can be fit enough to achieve this goal. And then after he achieved that goal, he just kept on going, right? I want to do 100-mile. What do I need to do to achieve that? And it's drawing upon his willpower. Willpower being the essence of it. I'm drawing upon my willpower that says, I want this. I want to get here. I want to achieve this goal. And I'm the only one, the only person in the world that can take responsibility to make that happen. So he's a great example. If you want to Google him, that might kind of really get you into the Mars-Uranus energy here. Recognizing that we are the only ones that can draw upon that level of self-leadership and self-agency to actually make fundamental changes and choices. But we have to be adequately sort of frustrated by the status quo of our own lives and recognize that we are in serious risk of just coasting through life and not actually making something of our potential. We're all in that risk. And it, transits like these often are a blessing, because if that stress builds up strong enough, or if enough environmental circumstances are eliciting that stress, it might just be the right blessing to motivate us to actually make a fundamental change, to move in a direction that we've never actually gone before. So, Taurus does speak to consistency, but then Uranus and Aquarius both speak to which we will often see as erratic or unpredictable. And these aren't incompatible ideas. This is not about becoming an erratic person, being like, I'm going to do that. It's actually about being able to make a fundamental change that actually grounds us long term in a path of tending to the garden of our own soul. This does not mean being unstable. It does mean allowing the stability of our dysfunctional life to be broken up a little bit. And if we're not making these changes, if we're not adequately motivated, I think the anger and that sense of I have to do something is a really important quality right now. Not to say we have to be feeling that, but I think that's definitely what can be emerging for many of us at this time. Because it says there is so much more to live. There's so much more to do. There's so much more potential to actualize. And if there wasn't that potential, maybe I wouldn't be feeling that stress. Maybe that anger wouldn't actually be arising right now. So, one more thing I want to say about this Mars. From the point of view of individuation, from the point of view of walking a path that others may not understand, and others have not walked, and others aren't giving us permission to walk, we have to appreciate on a vibrational level that our life only comes together when we come together. So often we're looking for the people that can resonate with us, the people that will understand us. We're looking for someone to recognize our good work, right? And from a more Newtonian physics point of view, we can think of life as a sort of like, well, do these things and these things will happen, right? If you want to attract people to your program, let's say, right? It's something that I'm working with. We'll put out these advertisements, put this much money towards these, these ways of getting yourself out there. But it's never worked that way for me. Every phase of success that I've had in my life And what do I consider success, right? I don't consider success making money or, getting a lot of attention. I consider success when I'm in my soul. I'm in my alignment. I'm doing the thing that brings me the most passion in life. Then I see it actually helping other people. I see the effects of that. And I'm like, okay, this is how I want to live, where I'm in touch with myself. I feel excited about being me. I'm me. I'm doing Ari. And that's bringing benefit. That's success, right? I've never experienced that when I'm just following the algorithm, the rhythm that the world has decided. And what's so interesting is moments in my life where maybe more money or more enrollment or more subscribers, things like that have come, or where more opportunities or good, healthy connections, right? That's emerged in my life, I think 100% of the time when I was just working on my own vibration. It's just how it is. Life is vibrational. So I felt to have a conversation with someone, right? The biggest video that my channel's ever gotten, right? The biggest number of views was my Aquarius through the houses. My friend Irliana invited me to go back on her channel and do that talk. And I was like, sure, I'm always happy to do an interview, to talk about anything. And we weren't going to do Pluto through the houses. I spontaneously decided that like a few hours before we actually did the talk. Why? Because that felt exciting to me. I don't even remember what the topic was going to be, but the existing topic didn't feel exciting. I was about to do the existing topic, but I can't stand doing things that I'm not in love with. I can do that for a while, but it always comes back to like, it's not what I want to do. It's not how I want to live. It's not what I'm here for. I don't feel my agency, my leadership, my choosing in that. So I just decided to suggest something different. And it was great. And it's like, for whatever reason, and I also had the thought, hey, can I post this on my channel too? I'll publicize. Check this out. This is brilliant. Okay. I told her, let me post this video on my channel and you'll post it on yours. And when I publicize it, I'll publicize your YouTube channel on my, when I send out my newsletter, I'll publicize your YouTube channel so that everyone who's getting word of this video will go to you. But, for those that don't get my newsletter, I'm going to put this on my channel so that they'll find it if they wouldn't have otherwise have found you, right? So it's a win-win situation, right? And anyone that goes to me will find your channel, all that, right? So she's like, sure, that's a great idea. So, I sent my newsletter. My newsletter has, 2,500 people. And I publicized her YouTube channel. I didn't point to my own. I posted on Facebook her video, right? Where she posted on her. I didn't point anyone. I put zero efforts, zero, to directing anyone towards that video that I posted on my channel. And that video got, at this point, I think over 12,000 views, which is about like 8,000 more than any video's ever gotten. So great example. And it's not just that I was in my vibration and my alignment and being authentic with myself. Even more than that, I was considering her. I was in a place of I want this to be about community. I'm grateful for this interview and the publicity it'll bring. People will find me. I'll grow my own work, my own following. But I want to point people to you too, right? So I wasn't even thinking of it in terms of like self-interest. And so there's a teaching here when we're excited about our calling, what enlivens us. It's never competitive. It's never like, I'm going to put more money than the competitors and, try to get the best SEO settings. And it's not like that's a bad thing either. I can probably do more with like making my website more visible or whatever. And I'm working with an amazing website designer right now who's like really helping me revamp things. But it's more about our vibrational resonance. The revamping that we're doing on my website is more about bringing out more of my vibration, helping me to bring forth more of my essence. We want to be thinking vibrationally in terms of resonance. And when we do that, we're always going to be inherently connecting with other people and supporting the larger field of growth, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. On the flip side, if we're not in touch with our own oomph, our own excitement, our own passion for life, we're not going to be feeling how our presence plugs into the greater ecosystem of growth right now. So I just really want to hold that as a prayerful perspective as Mars builds up towards that square. That disseminating to last quarter phase where we're moving into that square is some of the strongest energy. There's a lot of pressure, right? The energy is, ooh, something fundamental needs to change, but I don't quite know how to make that change. And that last quarter square is a breaking out. If I were to offer like a few one-liners, make the decision to do the things that are best for you. Care more about how you feel and feeling alive than the precedent. You know, here's a personal prayer, something I've been contemplating, and it relates a lot to the dream that I had last night. I know what it's like to make choices and to commit to those choices over a long period of time. And I've shared with everyone, I recently took 8 weeks of 0 sugar, 0 caffeine. The only sugar I had were blueberries, right? And one cup of juice. Not even fruits, no sugar, 0 caffeine. And it was mostly about, not just the health benefits, it was mostly about my willpower, mostly about my ability to know and prove to myself that I can make a choice like that. And that without these substances, it also, in the elimination of them, it brought me to a place of then needing to make choices to bring my energy up without that dependency, right? I worked out more. I was able to access greater and more helpful inner resources when I wasn't going to just fall back on caffeine, which I love caffeine, right? But not doing that was such an empowering experience. I've done that with, fasting, intermittent fasting, and choosing to only eat at a certain time of day. What I find to be interesting for myself, maybe many of you can relate to this. It's easy to make these decisions that I know make me feel better and healthy when I'm able to convince myself, for whatever reason, I don't know why I'm able to convince myself to do it when I do it and not other times, to do it for a period of time that I'm committing to. Without those commitments, I notice for myself, there tends to be less of a consistency in healthy, good choices. And maybe it's like I need to rebel. Maybe it's some immature part of myself that doesn't want to be limited, that doesn't want to be stuck or confined by some kind of limiting lifestyle where I can't just do and eat whatever I want to eat. But how funny is that? How funny is that? To not want to be limited or controlled, and thus to do things that actually creates a lot more limitation. Like when I am less decisive and intentional about what I'm doing with my diet and my body throughout the day, I have a lot less freedom than I do when I'm actually being more restrictive. And one of the deepest teachings of Mars is we don't just say yes to everything on a more visceral level, especially if we're feeling that stress. It's like we might find ourselves wanting to just, rage through and do whatever we want to do. And, the more gross level of consciousness of Mars isn't refined. It'll eat and take and want and do whatever it does. But as we mature, Mars points us to a more thoughtful self-leadership. Where do I want to go? And what do I need to say yes to and no to in order to get there? In fact, Mars connects with Saturn in that way, because Saturn's long-term growth and discipline. Mars is short-term decisions. Obviously, they're connected because we have to be able to weigh our Mars relative to our Saturn. Are my short-term decisions getting in the way of my long-term Saturn discipline and goal? And Saturn always points to where we have a greater capacity to see and understand where we need to go in the long term. And we'll speak about that briefly when I speak to the next phase of March, because that's going to be a big part of what's happening with Mars moving to Saturn. So as we mature, we do bring a lot more thoughtfulness and agency into our yeses and into our nos, which does mean self-restriction, self-limitation. But from a Mars point of view, it's actually bringing more energy, more strength, more vitality, whereas in the lack of these choices, we lose our vitality and our agency. We need to be willing to acknowledge that what we're going to be choosing right now will be different than what other people do. And that's okay. One of the hardest things with Mars in Aquarius is we don't want to differentiate ourselves. We don't want to step out from the group. The group can be our community, our friends, our colleagues, or our family. We don't want to embrace our life, our self-leadership, the importance of our personal choices if it's so different than what other people are doing. But there's a way of doing that and actually opening our heart to that vulnerability of that. And that's the Chiron piece right now. I mean, the self-leadership, what's so important right now, it's the theme. We have to claim our own soul path. And that might be very vulnerable. We might have a lot of fear. There might be a strong sense of, I don't want to be different. And what if I'm not going to make it? This is my prayerful reflection right now. I'm just really fascinated by how easy it is to create these parameters around these healthy choices. But then it's like when these parameters aren't established, how easy it is to just not have any defined direction. So this is something that I'm going to be reflecting upon for myself. And maybe we can all do this together. Over the next few days, let's make this a personal meditation that we're sharing together. And I would love to hear from you sincerely. If you've gotten this far, you're with me. If you're watching this video, put it in your comments. Let's build some kind of community momentum around being a healthier, more alive and engaged being. This is what I'm going to be contemplating. What would it take for me to make the choices in my life that I actually know bring more energy and health and purpose and clarity and alignment with my soul? This is going to be the point of my focus. And I'm not going to be meditating on this while not making those choices, okay? Like that's going to be the starting point. This is a good time to actually just bring a little bit more of that self-leadership and that thoughtfulness. What will it take for me to actually live a life that's more congruent with who I want to be and where I want to go? It's a very beautiful thing to be thinking about right now. And I will get back to you on that too. I'm not going to teach something that I'm not going to live. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to get back and share what I learn about that. Let's look at what's happening beyond the strong Aquarius phase. So we move further into March. It's interesting. We have Venus joins Saturn, and then Mars enters into Pisces. This is towards the very end of March. We're already at the last week or so. It's actually going to be just before the first eclipse. There is a lunar eclipse happening. Let me just show you that. That's going to be, about 10 hours before the moment that you're seeing right here, around the 24th or 25th of March. But all this stuff is entering Pisces. So let me briefly speak to what this movement into Pisces and the joining with Saturn. It's actually really beautiful because, in a way, if you can kind of follow this perspective, we have the bookshelf with 3 bookends, okay? We have Pluto right here, Saturn, and Neptune. So Mars and Venus are moving between Pluto and Saturn. And then, and this is more so in April, they'll both be moving between Saturn and Neptune. I mean, Venus will be moving between them, but then Mars will be moving through Saturn and Neptune in April. So February was very much the Pluto thing. March is Pluto and Saturn. right? And then April is Saturn and Neptune. And if you, again, think of each of these as new phase conjunctions, right? They're joining Pluto, joining Saturn, joining Neptune. They're starting a new cycle with each one of these, and at that same time further progressing in the relationship with the planet they recently formed a new cycle with. So these are like very important charging points. And what I'll just speak to right now is focusing on this growth into the semi-sextile from Pluto, and then that new phase with Saturn that we're approaching. Two things to say. We're going to find ourselves with a lot more self-awareness and self-perspective. What is it I'm actually doing long-term? It's almost like we began this new journey, a lot of radicalization, new changes, new growth. The question that I think is emerging for us as these planets move further into Pisces and into connecting to Saturn will be, okay, I see more clearly where this is going because I actually can understand deeply where I want to get. So maybe at first there was a sense of, I don't know what to do, what's next, what choices do I make? And that shifts because we're taking more responsibility to actually realize, oh, it's not like this external perspective that I'm looking for. It's an internal recognition of who I want to be. And the presence of Pisces is really significant because when we move from Aquarius to Pisces, we're looking at individuation, right? Liberation from precedent and from the known, claiming our own vibration, and then the choice to link our personal life with something of greater meaning, right? We're making a distinction in Aquarius, but then in Pisces, we're surrendering to something much greater than ourselves. And the Saturn and Pisces process is a very, very important process of discipline. It's as if I don't discipline myself, if I don't claim the importance of long-term practice and growth, my consciousness will be undefined. And I'll just go wherever life takes me. And it's not necessarily a positive thing. I'll just scroll on my phone all day and look at whatever happens and moments of excitement and interest. But there's going to be an ambiguity if we don't really say, hey, my life has greater meaning and purpose. All of this growth and radicalization in Aquarius and like claiming of myself, Pisces wants to take it and say, now give it greater meaning. Allow your personal life to be connected to something so much greater than your understanding. So the archetype of this Pisces energy is kind of like being in the hermitage, being in the monastery, where there's a simplified life. This is like the prayer we can hold for ourselves. It's a simplified life, not a lot of distractions, not a lot of confusion, because we've determined what is most valuable. We've decided what is most worthy of our time and our energy. And we can just give ourselves to that and devote ourselves to that and allow the Tao to take it where it's meant to go, allow the water to flow where it's meant to go. And that movement towards Saturn, that next station, that next bookend, is really about clarifying our commitment and setting ourselves up for long-term growth and change. So bringing it back to where we are right now, we can really think of this perspective of all of March is a radicalization to actually make more healthy, fundamental changes. And then we get to see how this is actually connecting with a greater meaning and purpose beyond our own making. We didn't create ourselves. We didn't create our soul. This is a fascinating thing to think about. Like, the soul didn't create itself. Our existence, our beingness is an emanation from the oneness, from the mystery that I can't even understand. Like, we come from that which is beyond our comprehension, that source that we all share, that gives meaning, that is the only meaning that exists. And knowing ourself is knowing our source, it's knowing our creator, right? Our divine mother, father, because we come from that. We didn't invent, right? So what is it we are choosing? What is it we are inventing or deciding? We're deciding to claim and honor our own vibration. When we claim that, we're sort of stepping into a field where we're noticing what it's like to be what we already are. We're just not dissociating from it anymore. And when we claim that, when we notice that, this is what it's like to be me. This is Ari. This is Ari showing up as Ari. Only then do we allow our words, our works, our efforts, our relationships to be guided by the will of one. Like Pisces being the will of oneness, that's always moving all things, all circumstances, all relationships back home to itself. Like we're all flowing back home. We're doing it together, and we don't really understand all of that. We don't hold all of the pieces in our minds at the same time. It's all interconnected. And our awakening is truly together, me doing my work and you doing your work. We don't just share and bless each other in the larger ecosystem. We're a part of a greater unfolding of all of us remembering what is fundamentally true. And that's the blessing here. Our lives have so much meaning. Our lives have so much meaning. So we need to get radicalized to appreciate the holiness and the meaning, the beauty of our lives is so greater than what we realize. But if we're not in touch with our own choosing, our own soul leadership, we can't allow that, right? So like the negative dimension of that Pisces can be just a deep sense of depression and disconnect. But if we're doing this work, I think there's a possibility for deeper meaning and holiness, which is what wants to be available. It's what wants to open up right now in our lives. So March is a very instigating time, but it's calling for our self-leadership, and it's preparing for April, which is one heck of a month. All these fundamental changes that want to happen, if we're not in vibrational resonance with it, that will heighten, that will intensify that sense of feeling disconnected from our life, right? The shocks and surprises and that sense of loss can be more heightened. I'll close with this thought. We often hear the teachings of Uranus being shocks and surprises, and I often say it's not implicitly so, right? The shocks and surprises are only happening relative to our own conditioning. So we're not expecting something new or different because our minds are stuck on the past and the known, and we're suppressing the pulse of reality itself. So these transits can feel like there's a lot of change and newness, but it's actually just pushing up against where we've crystallized our thoughts in this way of perceiving reality that's stuck, that's unmoving, and thus isn't real. And it's good to be able to make radical and bold choices that sort of bring us into a mindset that resonates more with change. You know, like I'm learning a lot when it comes to working out. What I find to be most important is not just getting exercises, but including within my exercise a period of high intensity where I'm really pushing myself, whether it's cardio or lifting weights, right? To really not just stop after I've gotten a little bit of exercise, to have a phase where I'm breathing very deeply and I'm feeling the burn and I'm committing myself to finish those 5 reps or to go that mile. Those kinds of experiences feel the most valuable because I'm making a choice to engage all of myself and bring myself fully into the experience and not just stop when it's uncomfortable. That's a practice for our minds. To not just get uncomfortable and stop, because then the evolutionary pulse of life will actually make us more uncomfortable. And that will feel even harder if we're not used to being uncomfortable. So one thing that David Goggins said about his practice of, pushing he's an example to an extreme of pushing boundaries, pushing himself. He knows, and this is not exact quote, it's a paraphrase, every day I find something uncomfortable and I push myself through it because I know there's going to come a day where life is going to bring me something uncomfortable. Whatever it will be. Something unwanted or challenging will happen for me. And I want to be able to face it. I want to know that I have the ability to say yes to that and to meet it and to not get weak, to not cower. We're always choosing between our weakness and our strength. That's a fundamental point of learning for all of us on our soul journey. We don't pretend the strength. The strength is something we cultivate as we make choices in life in reference to the fact of our strength. It's already there. Our soul is strong. We have to reference it and actually make it awake, make it livable, make it accessible to our local experience. And so these small choices to live a life where we're actually pushing our limits builds our character. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm going to take that time to reflect upon what it would take to make better choices. And I invite you to do the same. And I want to hear from you, and I want to see us doing it. I want to see us choosing to be healthier and to feel more alive and engaged with our lives. As always, I have my training program. It starts in a couple weeks. So if you want to study this work with me from the very beginning, with my guidance in community, this is an amazing opportunity to do this work. I've seen some comments. Some of you are in this program already. Some of you have taken this with me in the past. It's such a beautiful experience, and it builds community and also friendship that lasts for a long time. We also have every Monday, I'm doing live streams looking at aspects. This first series is aspects to Pluto. So check that out. I have a playlist so you can catch up on the old ones. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye, everyone.